Well, what a great Wednesday it is today in Kramer land, everybody. It's Mike Wolverton again with VintageKramer.com. Thought we would go over a few more details about the new Nightswan released by Kramer. Actually, last year, well, year before last, but the Aztec model specifically that was released this month. Just go over a few details. This is, sort of a semi-review. I'm not going to do any sound clips. If you guys want to see some really players that are better than me, do a lot better types of sound clips with this guitar. Go up to YouTube up there and search, and lots of guys that have done some pretty cool stuff with different switching, and you can hear clean tones, dirty tones, and those sorts of things. I did a test run a few days ago with our band to kind of show how the guitar sounds, kind of at a loud volume and whatnot. So you can check those out too in my channel. Anyway, thought we'd just start with some basics on the Nightswan to begin with. Most of you know this, but in case you don't, Nightswan originated in 1987 in all places Arlington, Texas, which is where I'm from. It's my hometown. Buddy Blaze was working with Vivian Campbell on a particular guitar called the Shredder, the Buddy Blaze Shredder guitar. That guitar was built in Arlington. 2 prototypes were built that Vivian played quite often in Whitesnake, seen lots of videos, polka dot guitar, the lightning guitar, those sorts of things. Anyway, and so, the story's all on my website. If you want to check it out at VintageKramer.com, you can go to the Nightswan page and see the detail on that. But anyway, they invented a really cool guitar, and what it amounted to was, and I have the Aztec here to kind of go over that, a 24 3/4 scale, basically shredding type of axe with a really small nut at the time, which was an R1 nut, because I guess Vivian's hands were pretty small, and with a strap body modified to have more of a scoop in the the high access area. And so, what was kind of interesting at the time, not a lot of strap based guitars were 24 3/4 bass. That's basically a Les Paul scale length. And for those that don't know what scale length is, a standard guitar generally has, or a Strat has, a 25.5 inch scale. So from the nut to the bridge, it's 25.5 inch. On 24 3/4 scales, it's sort of compressed a little more, like a Les Paul, where it's a shorter string span. So that'll come into play in a minute when we talk about setup. But the idea here is that Buddy and Vivian came up with that design. Buddy took some parts from Warmouth, modified those, and made a prototype basically, which became the polka dot guitar that you saw in the Whitesnake videos, and it turned into a really famous instrument. Eventually, Buddy went on to work for Kramer, and then Kramer came up with the production guitar, the Nightswan. Lots of details in between there. I'm not going to go into all the details about that, but that's kind of the origins of how it got started. Some of the things that you'll notice on the guitar itself were that are original to it were what they call the ping pong inlays. You've heard about those before. Having 2 humbuckers here. And in other videos, if you've seen them online, you'll know that this originally was the full shred, Seymour Duncan full shred pickup in the bridge, and there was a JB in this position. Kramer decided to go with the 2 JBs as opposed to a full shred. I agree with this. Not a big fan of the full shred pickup. Sorry guys that like it, but it's not my thing. This is more of a versatile type of setup, and I can confirm playing it with the band definitely has a better tone than my original Nightswan with that pickup configuration. Another interesting note too as well, this 24 3/4 scale design, Kramer eventually made the Kramer Pro Axe, which is a very good instrument as well. One of the most underrated instruments in Kramer history. It has what's called a parallel axis trimbucker in the bridge position. And being a mahogany body with a parallel axis trimbucker really led to an outstanding sound that I wish I never would have sold my Pro Axe because it sounded so good. So anyway, that's sort of the history and where we landed up until now. Kramer's been working on this guitar for quite some time. They, about 2 years ago, released the polka dotted version, and then now the Aztec came out. They've had the designs kind of on the back burner for quite some time to go off and do this. Just never had really the focus of the company to do that. And I'm sure all of you are aware that Gibson changed ownership several years ago, and I'm not going to bag on the prior regime too much, but I will say the new leadership really, if you guys don't know this, are really into Kramer, and that's a good thing for us collectors. I know Cesar, who is in the leadership community at Kramer, very much a Kramer fan, metalhead fan too. So I know that there's big plans for Kramer, stuff I can't talk about now, but I know for sure that they're working on some very, very big things. I know you've heard this in the past from Kramer, but they mean it. I mean, it's true. And their sales were really incredible last year, too, from what I'm hearing also. So back to the Nightswan. This was, kind of in their list of things they wanted to do over the last, 5 or 10 years, and, they finally did it. But anyway, a lot of work was put into this, even back in 2004, 2005, when at our Kramer conventions, they brought out some prototypes to us, and we were able to kind of check those out and see the evolution of what they were doing with some of these designs they were collecting. And we knew right away they were dead on. They were doing a really good job. So a lot of you have asked, well, why the R2 nut over the R1 nut? Honestly, a lot of feedback at our Kramer convention, they asked us, what did we think about that? And, I think probably the majority of Nightswan users would agree an R2 is a more comfortable string spacing than R1. I mean, I have fairly large hands, and I know my R1 on my original Swan is very difficult to play because of that. But it's very important to note that they did that, and I want everybody to understand too, not listed as a reissue. If you look on Kramer's documentation, they're not saying this is a reissue guitar, so it's not meant to be exactly perfect, but they captured the essence of it. Some of the other things too I thought I would add is, like, if you look at this one too, it's a 3-piece neck, and that's exactly like the originals. It's not a solid piece of maple or a solid piece of quarter-saw maple. It's just like the originals were, where it's a 3-piece. And the new Berettas, I think they're called the Beretta Vintage, same thing. They go with a 3-piece neck to kind of throw back to the way Kramer used to do it. And so very cool that they did that. They took that in. I've heard everything else. I mean, guys will say, well, they're not shallower tuners. Well, get over it. It's a locking nut. You don't need ridiculously good tuners on a guitar like this if you have a good locking nut, because they're rarely used except when you're restringing the guitar. And then of course the Allen wrench holder, and then everything else in the back you got going on. The interesting thing about the neck plate, kind of a throwback to the pre-85 neck plates with that design and the old Kramer logo. Pretty cool they did that to keep you from confusing it with vintage. And also the screw spacing is different as well than a vintage Nightswan, so it'd be hard to swap the bodies out. Way to go, Kramer. Keep the vintage stuff from falling apart. That's good. Some other kind of notes I've noticed after playing it, what I'll tell you is I did the unboxing video the other day, and it was pretty decent out of the box. What I didn't like so much was the fact that the neck wasn't adjusted, it wasn't fully flattened out yet, which that's all set up. And I'm going to say this, I know everybody on every video has said this so far, but listen to me closely. When you get this guitar, you will have to set it up. It will not be out of the box the perfect guitar playing experience, and that's, a good friend the other day on Facebook actually said, that's the difference in getting a guitar in a box versus getting it in a guitar store where they spend some time with it, hopefully, and set these things up. So lots of guys, in different towns across the United States can set up Floyd Roses. What I will tell you is, don't just assume taking it to your standard Guitar Center tech that they have on staff there can handle a Floyd Rose. So ask them a lot of questions about, have you set up Floyd Rose guitars before? Do you know how to set them up? That sort of thing. Go into a lot of detail about that. But let me go through what I did, and you can understand more what I did to set mine up, because I've got my action, pretty dang low. It's very comfortable to play now. What I did first is I actually took my neck off, and if you guys will laugh at this, but I took some of the finish off the back. I wanted more of a glide kind of finish. A lot of people like finish necks. My hands are real big and they drag, so I like them to be smooth, so I sanded it and oiled it. I took the neck off, did that, then took truss rod cover off, and if you're looking at the guitar this way, I turned half a turn that direction, maybe in a full turn, to straighten the fretboard out. And when you're first setting up a Floyd, you want to make sure this neck is extremely straight. You want to look down it and say, okay, from this point to the other point, completely straight. And got it all bolted back on after I did that. Remember, when you put your strings on and you get your string tension on there, it may bow again, so you may have to keep adjusting it to get it flat, because once string tension's on there, you're putting a lot of pressure on this headstock and it's going to try to come forward, so you may have to keep adjusting to get it flat. So after you get the neck back on, you start restringing it. It's important that with your Floyd, you'll notice that this is a floating Floyd, just like the originals. Even though it doesn't have a recessed route, it still floats. You'll want to put either a piece of plastic back here or a rag to keep from chipping out your paint. So because it's just going to get wobbly once you have your strings off. And then, then you have some options. So from the factory, this came with three springs. And in case you don't know much about Floyd, the amount of springs you have and the amount of tension you have controls the comfort zone of how you like your strings. If you like them slinky, if you like them to be a little more stiff, or even the string size matters too. So, and I'm an old school kind of Van Halen guy. I like mine slinky, and so this is kind of a common Van Halen way. If you look at some pictures of Ed's 5150, you can look on the back of his guitar and you can see this is kind of his method. And God rest his soul, the great Van Halen. Anyway, the interesting thing here is, I took a spring off in the middle and I angled these this direction, and I didn't have it screwed in that far when I started this process. I was more about right here. So as I put my strings on, you guys sort of tuning up. I tune up. I go to full 440, and then of course, with the springs being real loose, Floyd's going to go forward. So I go back and tighten up my springs, and then I tune it again. Tighten up my springs, and I do that until I can get my Floyd level with the body. And that's important because what you're trying to do there is get your Floyd to only be resting on the fulcrum points to where when you use it, it's truly going to go back to tune when you're done using it. And so, I can't stress enough that having your spring tension correct is very important. And lots of good videos on Floyd setups online. But I will say, if you're a beginner, if you don't know much about stringing guitars or whatever, a Floyd Rose setup is not for you. Not to say you can't have a Floyd Rose guitar, just saying that you need to get with a tech that really understands how to set up a Floyd Rose. Once you get that good with your spring tension and everything else really good in there, then you're going to go back and you're going to lower your posts or raise them, whatever you need to do to get your action low. And what you're looking for is your strings to ring out with as low action as possible without a lot of fret rattle. And you're trying to get to the point too where I can bend a high note or these other notes and I don't get any kind of fret out. And so you'll know if you've gone too far if your frets are starting to kind of fret out there. And that's kind of what I went through for setup. But again, YouTube out some Floyd Rose setup videos if you want to. Also too, one thing I noticed when I was playing this live, I think this has been noted by some other players, the volume taper is pretty sharp. So if you're going to use this and you want to try to roll it off to a real low volume to kind of get a good clean tone, you're probably going to replace this pot. I'm going to probably put a Bourne's pot in here eventually. Again, it's an $899 guitar. I'm not expecting a $3,000 starter model or an Ernie Ball, that type of setup. But the volume pot for sure is something you could look at replacing. Bourne's pots can be found on eBay. Same ones the EVH brand uses, but you can get them cheaper if you go to eBay and get them that way. And they're really loose and they have good roll off. Three-way switch is really cool. That's pretty awesome too if you just want to have some options. I lowered my middle pickup because when I pick, it was hitting the pickup. I don't use my middle pickup that much, so I just lowered it down where my pick wouldn't hit it. And it played really good at practice. I mean, again, a ton of videos on YouTube of guys playing it with tone sounds, but I wanted to go over some of the specifics of the guitar itself. But as far as practice goes and as far as how it did at practice, it was just one of those guitars that just really talked to me. I was surprised. It actually really surprised me. I'm really used to Wolfgangs and Ernie Balls and that sort of thing. And going back to a shredder guitar, I wasn't necessarily, thinking that was going to be a go-to thing for me. But I kept it on all night, played it all night long, loved it. Just to give you an example, it's a real loud guitar, and which is, a lot of Floyd guitars, when you go to strum them without an amp, aren't loud. They're cheap sounding. It's the real deal. I've actually got behind me a reissue as well that was from 2011 or 10, somewhere in there, but maybe been earlier than that. But it's a Pacer reissue, and this is a fully USA instrument that Gibson made for Kramer around that time frame. A true USA instrument. And I could say these two are on par with each other. They're different instruments. This one's more of a super strat style, and this one's more of a kind of shredder style guitar. But $899. This was a $1,300 guitar at the time, USA. I can tell you that they're very, very similar guitars in terms of quality. I'm not I'm not trying to fanboy out on this. This is definitely a guitar I like quite a bit. So, um, any questions? Feel free to get into our Kramer Guitar Forum Facebook group. We're up there talking about it quite a bit. Send me a message through Facebook through our Vintage Kramer Facebook account, and glad to answer questions on it. Again, this is a home run. I'm really impressed with. I think Gibson did a great job this time around. Gibson's version of Kramer, and I'm excited to keep playing it and keep breaking it in. It seems like the more I play it, the better it gets. So anyway, guys, keep rocking out there, and remember to like and all those sorts of things with our YouTube video here. But thank you for listening.